Welcome to Psych Muse, where we explore the wisdom of psychology and philosophy to understand the hidden forces shaping our lives. Today, we turn to one of the greatest minds of the 20th century, Carl Gustav Jung, the Swiss psychiatrist and thinker who gave us concepts like the collective unconscious, archetypes, and the shadow self. Unlike many academics, Jung didn't just study the mind. He explored the depths of human experience, dreams, myths, and symbols to uncover timeless truths about what makes us whole. But Jung wasn't only concerned with what helps us grow. He also warned us about the toxic forces and destructive behaviors that corrode the human soul. Jung understood that the greatest dangers are often not external enemies, but the behaviors we allow, normalize, and tolerate, sometimes without even realizing it. In this video, we'll explore 10 unacceptable behaviors Carl Jung said we must never tolerate in others, and most importantly, in ourselves. These aren't just abstract theories. They are red flags that can drain your energy, fracture your identity, and trap you in unhealthy cycles. If you want to live a life of clarity, strength, and authenticity, you must learn to recognize these behaviors early and cut them off before they take root. Jung believed that ignoring them was not only dangerous for your relationships, but devastating for your inner self. So let's dive into the first two. Stay with me until the end, because every behavior we'll uncover adds a vital piece to Jung's bigger picture. How to protect your psyche and live true to your deepest self. Part 1. Dishonesty and self-deception. The first unacceptable behavior Carl Jung warns against is dishonesty, and not only the lies told to us by others, but the lies we tell ourselves. Jung believed that truth is the foundation of psychological health. Without truth, the psyche becomes divided. He wrote that the human personality is like a house. The conscious mind is the part we live in, but beneath it is the vast unconscious, filled with everything we ignore, repress, or deny. When we lie to ourselves, we close off entire rooms of that house. We seal them shut, pretending they don't exist, but the truth is, those rooms are still there. And sooner or later, the pressure from behind those locked doors begins to break through. Take, for example, someone in a toxic relationship who convinces themselves that everything is fine. They smile on the outside, but deep down they feel suffocated and resentful. This is self-deception, a refusal to face reality, because reality feels too painful. But what Jung teaches us is that ignoring the truth doesn't protect us. It only delays the confrontation and makes the eventual collapse far worse. Jung described this inner conflict as the struggle between the persona, the mask we wear for the world, and the shadow, the hidden parts of ourselves we deny. The more we tolerate dishonesty, the greater the split between mask and shadow becomes. And the greater that split, the more fragile our psyche. Dishonesty in others is equally toxic. When someone lies to us, they violate trust, the very bond that makes relationships possible. Jung believed that trust is sacred. It is the bridge that allows two psyches to meet. Lies don't just break that bridge, they poison it. This is why Jung insisted, do not tolerate dishonesty. Not in your relationships, not in your friendships, and not within yourself. Every time you accept a lie, you trade authenticity for illusion. And every time you deceive yourself, you move further away from the path of individuation, the process of becoming whole. Ask yourself, where in my life am I tolerating dishonesty? What truths am I avoiding because they are uncomfortable? Jung would say that facing these questions is painful. Yes, but the pain of truth is always cleaner and lighter than the poison of deception. Part 2. Manipulation and control. The second behavior Jung considered unacceptable is manipulation, the act of twisting reality to control others or allowing others to twist reality to control you. Jung believed that every human being has the right and the responsibility to pursue their own path toward individuality. He called this journey individuation, becoming the person you were truly meant to be. But manipulation stands directly in the way of that journey, because it robs you of freedom. When someone manipulates you through guilt, flattery, fear, or subtle psychological tricks, they are not engaging with your authentic self. Instead, they are imposing their will upon you, bending your energy toward their goals. Jung saw this as a deep violation of the psyche, because it blocks you from discovering your own truth. Consider a common example, the guilt-tripping friend. Every time you try to set a boundary, they respond with, "I guess you don't care about me anymore." Or the partner, who constantly twists your words until you begin to doubt your own memory. These behaviors may seem small at first, but they are forms of psychological control. Left unchecked, they grow into patterns that drain your confidence and erode your sense of reality. Jung taught that manipulation is dangerous because it causes a loss of psychic energy. Instead of directing your life force toward your own growth, you pour it into maintaining someone else's illusion. Over time, you begin to lose touch with who you are, because you've been conditioned to serve the manipulator's story. Even worse, tolerating manipulation invites the shadow into your life. Jung believed that when we allow others to control us, it is often because we have not confronted our own shadow, the part of us that fears rejection, abandonment, or conflict. Manipulators prey on these hidden fears, but if we face the shadow directly, those fears lose their grip, and manipulation loses its power. That is why Jung would insist, do not tolerate manipulation. The moment you see it, name it. The moment you feel it, resist it. And if necessary, walk away from those who refuse to respect your freedom. Because in Jung's vision of the healthy life, freedom is not optional, it is essential. Without freedom, individuation cannot happen. Without individuation, you cannot become your true self. And without becoming your true self, life remains a half-lived shadow of what it could be. Part 3. Victim mentality and refusal of responsibility. The third unacceptable behavior Carl Jung warns us never to tolerate is the victim mentality, the refusal to take responsibility for one's own life. Jung believed that responsibility is the cornerstone of psychological maturity. To live as though everything bad that happens is someone else's fault is to surrender your freedom. Yes, life is full of suffering. Jung never denied that. But he argued that the way we respond to suffering determines whether it destroys us or transforms us. The victim mentality is seductive because it provides comfort. If you believe you are powerless, then you no longer have to try to struggle or to change. You can blame the world, your parents, your partner, or fate itself, while avoiding the painful work of self-examination. But Jung saw this as a prison. He wrote that neurosis is always a substitute for legitimate suffering. In other words, when you avoid the honest suffering of taking responsibility, you invite a deeper, more corrosive suffering that eats away at your soul. Think about someone who continually says, "Why does this always happen to me?" Every failure, every setback, every disappointment is cast as the universe being unfair. This mindset might gain sympathy, but it never produces growth. Jung would say that by tolerating this mindset, in yourself or others, you give permission for weakness to replace strength, and for stagnation to replace transformation. Why is this so dangerous? Because Jung believed that the unconscious feeds on whatever attitude we take toward life. If we choose the victim role, our unconscious responds by reinforcing helplessness. But if we take responsibility, even for small things, the unconscious responds by releasing energy and clarity. This is why Jung described responsibility as an alchemical process. It transforms pain into power, darkness into light, chaos into meaning. Therefore, Jung's warning is clear. Never tolerate the victim mentality. Encourage responsibility in yourself and expect it in others. Because while you may not control what life throws at you, you always control how you meet it. And that choice, repeated daily, shapes the entire destiny of your psyche. Part 4. Projection and blame. The fourth behavior Jung considered unacceptable is the habit of projection, the unconscious act of seeing in others what we refuse to acknowledge in ourselves. For Jung, projection was one of the most destructive psychological mechanisms. He observed that humans carry within them the shadow, the repressed aspects of the personality, all the impulses, desires, and traits we would rather not admit. Instead of facing these qualities, we often project them outward, accusing others of being selfish, manipulative, or cruel, when in truth those very qualities exist in us. Consider the person who constantly calls others arrogant, but secretly longs for recognition themselves, or the one who condemns dishonesty, yet often bends the truth for their own advantage. These are not simply hypocrisies, they are projections. Jung warned that projection keeps us blind. When we see our flaws only in others, we remain unaware of the shadow within us, and thus we remain incomplete. But projection is not only damaging to the individual, it corrodes relationships. A marriage can collapse under the weight of constant blame. Friendships can wither when one person uses the other as a screen for their own hidden insecurities. Jung observed that projections, once cast, create endless conflict because the other person can never truly live up to or down to the false image placed upon them. Why should this behavior never be tolerated? Because projection blocks individuation. To individuate is to integrate the shadow, to make peace with all parts of oneself, even the darkest. But as long as we project, we remain ignorant of who we really are. Jung compared it to carrying a bag of stones and throwing them at everyone we meet, without realizing those stones were ours all along. So Jung's teaching here is profound. Do not tolerate projection. When someone constantly blames others, refuses self-reflection, or always sees the problem as out there, recognize this as a toxic pattern. And when you catch yourself doing the same, stop and turn inward. Ask what in me is being revealed by what I see in others. Because in Jung's eyes, the people who irritate us most often carry the very lessons we most need to learn. Part 5. Suppression of emotion and inner truth. The fifth unacceptable behavior Jung warns against is the suppression of emotion and inner truth. In Jung's psychology, emotions are not weaknesses. They are signals from the unconscious. They tell us when something is wrong, when boundaries are being crossed, when values are being betrayed. To suppress emotion is to silence the voice of the psyche itself. Yet many of us are taught from childhood to hide how we feel. We are told not to cry, not to get angry, not to appear vulnerable. Over time, this conditioning becomes internalized and we begin to censor ourselves. But Jung observed that what we suppress does not disappear. It retreats into the unconscious, where it grows darker, heavier, and more dangerous. Think about the man who suppresses his anger for years, only to one day explode in uncontrollable rage. Or the woman who buries her grief until it manifests as depression or illness. These are not random breakdowns. They are the psyche's way of forcing us to confront what we refused to feel. Jung called this enantiodromia, the principle that whatever is pushed to an extreme will eventually swing to its opposite. Suppress enough emotion and eventually it bursts forth uncontrollably. Jung believed that authentic living requires the integration of emotion To integrate is not to indulge blindly in every feeling, but to acknowledge emotions, understand their meaning, and give them proper expression. Suppression, on the other hand, creates fragmentation. It splits us into a public self that seems calm and a hidden self that is boiling over. This is why Jung would say, never tolerate the suppression of emotion. In yourself, learn to listen when your feelings speak, for they are the language of the soul. And in others, be wary of those who always silence themselves, or who demand that you silence yourself. A relationship without honesty of feeling is not a true relationship. It is a performance. Jung's advice here is liberating. The path to wholeness does not lie in silence or repression, but in courageously bringing our emotions into the light, where they can teach us, guide us, and ultimately heal us. Part 6. Over-identification with persona and external validation. The sixth unacceptable behavior Carl Jung warns us never to tolerate is over-identification with the persona, that mask we wear, and the unending craving for external validation. Jung taught that every person creates a persona, a social mask designed for interacting with the external world. It's built from cultural expectations, societal norms, family pressure, what we believe others expect of us. The persona is not evil, it's necessary. Without it, we would be maladaptively raw to the world. But the problem arises when the persona starts to define us more than it serves us. When we become the persona, we lose touch with those parts of ourselves that do not conform. Our insecurities, our dreams, our contradictions. We begin to measure our worth by likes, praise, achievements, appearances. We edit ourselves to please, to be accepted, to fit in, and every time we do so, we distance ourselves from authenticity. Over-identification means that criticism crushes us, because so much of our self-worth rests on what others think. It means we hide what's true about ourselves, our vulnerabilities, our quirks, because they may break the image. And in hiding, we build a brittle identity, one that cracks under stress, discomfort, conflict. Jung warned that this behavior is deeply unhealthful. It causes what he called ego inflation. The ego becomes too big, too dependent on external validation, so fragile that even a whisper of failure feels catastrophic. Worse, as we identify more with persona, our shadow, the parts we repress, grows in darkness. The more we try simply to look good, the deeper our inner conflicts become, because we refuse the parts of ourselves that are messy, uncertain, unloved. This is why Jung would say, never tolerate over-identification with persona or the need for constant external validation. Be deeply suspicious of the voice inside that says you must look perfect, you must be admired, because that voice is often someone else's. Expectation, societal, familial, cultural, not your own soul's voice. Seek instead to live from your essence. Let yourself grow from the inside out. Allow imperfection. Allow vulnerability. Allow the parts of you that are not polished. Because only when the persona is subordinated to the self, the whole psyche, can you begin to live truly, holy and free. Part 7. Closed mindset versus openness to inner transformation. The seventh behavior Jung warns us never to tolerate is the closed mindset, rigidity of belief, the refusal to be challenged, the fear of inner transformation. Jung's life work is the work of opening to what we do not yet know, what frightens us, what we have rejected. The unconscious, he believed, is not just a repository of darkness, it is vast potential, mystery, creativity, and truth waiting to be discovered. But a closed mindset builds walls around that mystery. I am this way. I will never change. If it's uncomfortable, reject it. Such rigidity is easier in the short term. It feels safe. It feels certain. But what does safety cost you when it stops your growth? When you cling to what's familiar, you miss what's possible. When you refuse feedback, your blind spots grow. When you fear discomfort, you also fear transformation. Jung's concept of individuation demands courage to confront what we don't like, what we fear, what we deny, to stare into the shadow, to question our assumptions, to let our beliefs be shaken, to allow discomfort and pain to lead into renewal. Without transformation, Jung writes, life stagnates. Think about someone who never questions their beliefs, no matter what evidence emerges. Someone who rejects feedback, insults, critique. Someone who mocks those who change. That closed mindset might give the appearance of strength, but it is brittle. It cannot flex. It cannot adapt. It cannot heal. Thus, Jung would insist, do not tolerate a closed mindset, whether in others or especially in yourself. Be open to your inner life. Be open to changing. Be open to discomfort. Because transformation is the crucible of becoming. Without it, you live not fully but half alive, under the tyrant of familiarity and fear. Ending. We've walked together through 10 unacceptable behaviors that Carl Jung warns us never to tolerate: dishonesty and self-deception, manipulation and control, victim mentality, projection and blame, suppression of emotion and inner truth, over-identification with persona and external validation, closed mindset and refusal of inner transformation, and the other behaviors we explored earlier. These aren't just items on a checklist. They are beasts that creep into our lives if we aren't vigilant. They undo our inner harmony, erode our sense of self, and block the path to the life Jung calls individuation, becoming who we truly are. So what now? Here are a few steps you can take right away. 1. Face your truth. Honest journaling, reflection, asking yourself, where have I tolerated dishonesty? Where have I silenced my emotions? Set boundaries, and with others and with yourself. When someone tries to manipulate or control, learn to say no. When you feel compelled to seek validation, pause and ask, why am I doing this? Name the shadow. Notice projection. When you get upset with others, ask yourself, is this reflection of something in me? Practice openness and allow discomfort. Let beliefs be questioned. Let growth hurt sometimes. It's part of becoming whole. Carl Jung once said, the most intense conflicts, if overcome, leave behind a sense of security and calm that is not easily disturbed. If you walk this path, confronting what you've tolerated, what you've hidden, what you've let go unchallenged, you build a self that is resilient, balanced, and authentic. Thank you for watching. If this video spoke to something inside you, share it. Comment which of these behaviors you see in your life or others, and make sure to subscribe to Psych Muse for more deep dives into psychology, philosophy, and inner growth. Live with courage. Seek truth. Become whole.